Hello, friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Cinemondo podcast. Today we're going to talk about a TV series, or a streaming series.
TV series.
Something that I saw on the television.
Netflix series.
It's a Netflix series by a favorite of ours, someone that we've covered just about everything he's done, Flanagan, Mike.
Mike Flanagan, a favorite.
He's done some great stuff, and this one is called Midnight Mass, and it's a 7-episode miniseries.
Yep.
Is it 7?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it takes place on this place called Crockett Island, which is this fictional island. Feels very much in the world of Stephen King.
Right.
It's kind of a dying fishing island, 30 miles from the mainland. And there's only about 127 people left there. So there's the sheriff, who is called Sharif by a character because he's a Muslim, and his son. And then there are other characters. There's family. There's main character Ryan, played by Zach Gilford.
Riley.
I'm sorry, not Ryan. Riley. And he comes back because he had a horrible situation, off island in Chicago, where he was drunk driving, head-on collision with a young woman who died. Of course, he got scratches,
So he spent a few years in prison, so he's disgraced and has no, business anymore. So he came home to this dying town.
Ruined his life. He's racked with guilt. He has horrible dreams, guilty dreams, and he goes back to his island. And the island is a bit strange. Mark mentioned it's kind of a Stephen King thing. I got that in a huge bucket of that feeling.
Yeah.
And it was, fishermen and all that kind of thing. And it's an island community. It's isolation thing. They make a big point to let you know that it's very difficult to get there and get off the island. And, the ferries and whatnot. And it's also, the other thing about this is very religion-based aspect to the show, and also to the island. The island has this old church that's run by the old Monsignor Pruitt, who's like the beloved old priest. It's a Catholic church, and he's the old priest. And basically the setup, the quick premise is he goes off to the Holy Land as an 80-something-year-old man, and everybody's like, I hope he's going to be okay. And but then he doesn't come back, and they send, the church, the diocese sends another priest to replace him. Father Paul, I think is his name, right? And he comes in, and everybody kind of immediately likes him. He's a super likable guy.
He's played by Hamish Linklater, who is instantly likable. I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff lately, and he really comes off in a really unique kind of dorky with a little bit of an edge. Like, he's a very, very talented actor. He can go either way. Like,
he was perfectly cast and perfectly written as this type of sort of jeans wearing, I'm one of you kind of priest guys.
Yeah.
All the, I remember I went to a Christian school growing up, and I remember those guys. I remember the guy that would be like, hey man, we're going to rap about Jesus. Yeah. And, he'd pull out a guitar and start playing Stairway to Heaven. It's like, speaking of heaven, man, there is a, and he was like, the actor really captured that likable religious leader vibe. Yes. And it's the reason why he's charismatic. He's, good-looking kind of guy. I guess he's good-looking. He's got cool hair. And
cool-looking hair.
I doth covet his hair. But
his beautiful head hair.
And he's got this, there's a woman who's the assistant, kind of like, she's I don't know what her title is, but she's sort of his right-hand helper type, and she is great. The actress that plays her is just great.
Samantha Sloyan.
Right. Yeah. She plays Bev Keane, and
she's so righteous. Oh my god.
Oh, you want to
kill her dead in this thing. She's awful.
Super strict. Yeah. Very judgmental. She thinks she's better than everyone.
Yes.
She's a Stephen King character through and through.
She does the thing that, this show is basically about, to me it was anyway, it was about religion and about how that you can abuse religion and how religion can be like an infection in some ways if it's abused. And she was a perfect example of that type of person who uses moral superiority as a bludgeon.
Yes.
Like it's like I am chosen. I am the chosen one, and I can tell you how to live your life because I am God's right. I am at God's right hand, and you are not.
Especially towards the sheriff who's Muslim, and just the condescension towards him and his his son, at least the early part of the series, is so like just hateful. It's just unbelievable. Yeah.
And Riley, who comes back to visit his family, is an atheist.
Right.
So he's kind of like landing in this town that's hyper Catholic with a few little, people who aren't, but mostly it's a very religious bubble that they live in. So he's in there kind of just rolling his eyes. And it's really the only thing to do. The only social thing to do is go to church there. So, that's literally the only thing to do there besides go to an island where there's a bunch of cats.
And Riley had gone outside of that bubble, and therefore he had kind of experienced the bigger world out there. And you do tend to come back to these small, if you grew up in a small town and you do live out in a big city for a good chunk of your life and you come back, you do start thinking, this isn't for me. This is not my home. As much as I love my parents and my family and my old friends and whatever, I know I've seen the light. I've seen beyond.
All of a sudden, this world seems very small, like when you go back home like that. So before we go much further, I want to make sure we put a huge, strong spoiler warning, because you really do not read or watch anything about this show. It's better if you know nothing. So, and we're going to spoil the fuck out of it. So we're definitely watch it.
We're going to go into the spoiler zone, and we're going to spoil the show. So I'm giving everybody enough time with the blinking spoiler zone sign to get out of the room, run, flee, get out. And from now on, we're going to spoil stuff.
Yes. And before we start, I wanted to play the trailer real quick so we get a vibe.
Sure.
So we can do that real quick. And here it goes.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
An empty land. I knew the pathway like the back of my hand.
Keen doing the music song.
Welcome home, honey, where you belong.
Is this the place we used to love? Is this the place that I've been dreaming of?
I know you struggled with what happened.
With what I did.
Yes, with what you did. But help is here.
A simple thing. Where have you gone?
Good morning. I know I'm not who you expected to see. Just know I'm only here to help, and I look forward to meeting you all.
So tell me when you're gonna let me in.
I'm a pretty rational guy.
Something's happening here.
You're gonna let me in.
We are living in a miraculous time.
You're gonna let me in. You're gonna let me in.
I think I'm crazy. I mean, what's a little crazy between friends, right?
Come on.
What are you doing?
Come on.
What is wrong with you? Stop it.
It's not funny.
Have you ever made, why don't we go? Talk about it somewhere only we know.
Open your minds.
This could be the end of everything.
Open your hearts.
So why don't we go?
I want you
So why don't we go?
to run.
Somewhere only we know.
I am so glad that you will be with us for what comes next.
Kind of gives away a little bit.
A little bit.
I
But,
mean, the
the
fact that it gets that intense,
it also doesn't give away a lot.
no,
at the same
it doesn't
time.
give away the thing, but It gives away the fact that things go awry and everything burns down, and major, but when I first started watching, I knew nothing about
Me
it.
either.
I watched it with no knowledge of what was happening.
And that's the way you should watch it.
Yeah.
Because it's so like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So weird.
And it also there's so many different characters, because it really starts with Riley and his family. Henry Thomas plays his dad, and then Kristen Lemon plays mom. And so that's like the first episode's that family dynamic. And then you meet Erin, the school teacher, and you get to know about her situation. She sort of, sort of mirrors Riley's, because she went off island and came back. And then you meet, of course, the priest and Bev, and then the sheriff. There's a lot of different characters, the drunk, Joe Colley, and on and on and on, the mayor, and then the woman, the young girl there who was in the wheelchair, and what happens to her. So it's like a very much an ensemble piece, and every actor or every character has their chance to, get fleshed out.
Yeah, it is a 7-part series, so it's basically a 7-hour movie. So you have time to do all this character development and all these, emotional monologues that everybody got at least one of.
Well, I actually, I thought it was kind of bold. I actually loved these situations be two people, mostly just two people in a room, and they have these long discussions. And I loved that sort of very intricate, getting deep into some thought process and a little bit of conflict and a little back and forth. Like, I thought there was something real, and I realized how often we don't see that, just a simple setup. Like, I love the AA meeting where it was just him and the priest, and they sat there, just the two of them, for a couple of them. And there's a couple long sequences of them just talking about like religion and rational thought, and, why, he feels guilty, and like all, and why he might need God or why he doesn't need God. I thought that was really, really fascinating, profound stuff. Like, I'm actually watching a trailer and talking now, I get goosebumps thinking about some stuff in this movie. And even just watching the show, I was sort of like crying watching it, seeing all these people, and they don't know what's coming. And it was just like, it was just a very classic Flanagan of like, he takes a concept and then makes it super emotional. He always gives you this like ending that's like almost heart swelling and tragic all at the same time. Like, he's so good at that. He doesn't give you the big bang, stupid ending. He gives you this almost a soft landing after all this crazy stuff, and even though it was tragic and horrible, I feel like he infused it with this sort of, I don't know, the super emotional, heartwarming aspect. I don't know. I don't know how he does it. He blends those things.
This is like, Mike Flanagan is Irish, and he grew up as an Irish Catholic. I read up on this, and he grew up in the church, and then he started reading the Bible and realizing all the dark, horrible stuff that is in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so he ended up, he's now an atheist and he doesn't believe in this stuff, but it sort of helped him say, I'm going to do a film about act. He's really sort of the Riley character in many ways, without sort of DUI and all that. And
without the DUI.
Yeah, but I'm going to bring my love of horror and that kind of stuff sort of melded together. And so that's what you're getting here. You're getting a lot of religion, and you're getting horror sort of sprinkled in. So it's really heavy religion chats and, that kind of stuff, theology, and how people are believers or how people become non-believers. And it's almost an afterthought. It gets hot and heavy towards the last couple of episodes. But really the first 4 or 5 episodes, it's there's something going on here. We don't know what it is. We figure out what it is.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting take. It's like you said, Kathy. It's softer in some ways because it really talks about religion, and I found that interesting. Being not a religious person, it's interesting to sort of catch that and understand why.
Yeah, I don't have conversations like that with religious people. I don't know anyone I can talk to that openly, like that about religion, have that sort of, this is why I don't believe, this is why I believe conversations, because everybody gets very offended. And, it was nice to see these rational conversations about it. And I thought that was interesting, hearing intelligent, informed people talk about it. But also, it's like, because he came in this bubble, you realize when he's on, everyone speaks in Bible verses. The whole thing is like, glory be, and it was like one Bible verse after another. I mean, it's just how they speak. It's their vernacular. Like they can't even go to the store and ask for something without like bringing some sort of Bible verse into it. Like it was so like, and that's how they lived. It was just so overloaded with that. That was their thread, this binding between all these people, was this kind of thought process.
And Bev Keane, she's really the leader of the island.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's afraid of her.
Yeah, she's the one with the rat poison and doing all this, and the sad
Shady
death of the dog in episode 2 and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened here, but it was just sort of culminating in like nobody survives it. Let's face it. I mean, it's so intense. Yeah. It's like, my God, these are characters I care about.
I know.
And they're all, going away, not surviving. So
I actually not a huge fan of this. I found it really depressing. It was just like this spiral into despair kind of a show. And it had its moments, and I guess I enjoyed it, but I just felt like it was just a big bummer. It was like death, and talking about death, and people dying, and then talking about dying, and life after death, and to me the religion stuff. I mean, I grew up around all that, and to me, I just don't like the sound of it. I don't like the look of it and the trappings of it. And I know that sounds terrible to say that, but it's not all religion, obviously. I mean, there's really great religious people. I'm talking about the kind of religion that is what's depicted in this show, which is the kind that's wrong-headed and designed to subjugate people and hurt people and insult and belittle and enslave people. And this, to me, the show was kind of a metaphor for that idea that, if you keep people scared and keep them dumb and keep them weak and keep them drinking this, I guess people call it the Kool-Aid,
the communion.
You keep them in, you get them committed. It's, and you get
ritualized.
Them, you ritualize this thing, and then they're in your control, and you can do anything. And the show had a kind of a vibe of what it turns out to ultimately be, which is kind of surprising. Here comes the really, spoiler part, is that it is basically a vampire story, and it takes the idea of a vampire and combines it with that drink of this, for this is my blood, eat of this is my flesh, and the transmutation of the flesh and the blood of Jesus is supposedly, when you drink that, you are literally, it is turning into the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. And, people believe that when they do that, they are literally consuming. And so therefore you're drinking blood and eating flesh. And so the idea from that, and also the idea of angels being this horrific thing in the Bible, they're not these beautiful little cherubs, They are horrific visions that people are terrified of, and they do horrible, they do things that when you read it now, you're like, wow, that sounds like a monster or a creature of some kind, like the way it's described. So in the film, the old father goes to his visit to the Holy Land, and he wanders off and finds some ruins that have been uncovered by the sandstorm that he catches himself in. He goes in, and he's attacked by a creature with wings that is basically an angel. Drinks his blood, and then drips its own blood into, and therefore resurrects him with the blood. And when he wakes up, he's a young man, and guess what? He's the young priest who's now on the island. So
now the old priest is actually the same priest.
Yeah,
Monsignor Pruitt is actually Father Paul. But that's the conceit of conceit of him, of religion. Like, I'm going to bring this angel back in a trunk, and I'm going to feed. I'm going to share this bounty with everybody else on the island.
He thinks he's literally, in a way, giving people eternal life. He thinks it's a gift. I mean, I think he honestly believes it. I'm not sure how much of it is the influence of the actual angel, or if it's, him truly believing it, because he has a monologue at the end where he talks about there's just so much death, and there's so much, this torrent of death. Like, how can God even hear my pitiful prayers if he's hearing all these, things dying? So maybe I can take a little of that load off by giving these people life. I think he really believed he was bringing this miracle. And I think my favorite thing about it is combining religion with a vampire legend, because to make religion a horror story, it really amazing how seamless that transition is and how perfectly he made that work, because he even says, like, it's literal, everything's literal, like you said, eating the communion, it's eating a body, it's actually drinking blood, which you find out they actually are, because he's spiking the wine with the vampire blood, so they're all getting their micro doses. And then he talks about how the angels, when people see him, they have to be reminded by the angels, it's okay, don't be afraid, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm an angel, because everyone's terrified when they see him. So they've already been totally programmed to not be afraid when they see this horrific, demon looking angel, who's, which seems really obvious to us as the rational, viewers, who we're like the entryway with Riley, where we're the rational eyes on this insane thing that is happening, and everyone's so blinded by the reaction of bringing a Bible verse in to cure everything. Whether it's when you're afraid, you say this Bible verse. When you're not sure about, this doesn't seem like the right thing to do, and then you go, well, I'm supposed to be afraid, that's part of God's test. God's testing us. They could find an excuse for anything, murder, drinking blood. I thought that was a really genius overlay, and combining that with horror like that.
Yeah, it's risky because you're going to offend people, of course, and I think this is probably offensive to some people. But it shouldn't be. It should. In other words, it should be offensive to people who use religion like that. I don't care about offending people like that, but the people who aren't doing that with their religion, the people that are earnest and good and compassionate with their interpretations of religion, and they interpret it in a way that brings joy and goodness to other people and helps people, and doesn't put that whole us versus them thing on religion that you see so much of. Like, we are the chosen ones, we are better than them, they're going to hell, we're going to heaven. Subtract that part and think about the idea of religion being a sort of a guide, if you need it, a guideline for being good to people and making the world a better place. And I think the characters near the end of the story kind of realize that. There's a couple of moments where it's like, wait a minute, this isn't what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be like this. This is bad.
Well, I love, the midnight mass was this big Easter midnight mass. And of course the priest at this point has, gone full, basically, he can't come out during the day. So he's like, I'll have a midnight mass. He was finding excuses not to go out in the daylight, knowing he was gearing up for this amazing miracle he was about to perform. And I think he earnestly believed it in a way. So I love the idea that they create this beautiful looking ritual with the lanterns, and they're all coming, they're singing the hymns, and he's in the church waiting for him in his gold robes, and it's also beautiful. And he has to kind of prepare him, saying, okay, this is going to be really scary at first, just trust God. And so when he poisons the first person, they're all like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. And it turns out, it's probably not right. But I love how this beautiful thing it completely becomes this terrible mess. Like, it's not graceful, it's not beautiful, it's a mess, it's confusing, it's scary. There's
Jim
like
Jones.
blood everywhere. Oh my gosh. So I love that even when the massacre goes down, it's so sloppy and messy and horrible, like intentionally, it's just ugly, Well, and I think he was really, taken aback by what happened. I think he thought it was going to be this beautiful experience.
The thing we forgot to mention is the fact that he had done, evidently had performed miracles. And, there were a few things happening in the town since he arrived, and they started drinking the communion, which is laced with, angel blood. A lot of them start sort of healing. The things that are wrong with them start to get better. Well, they get younger. The little girl in the wheelchair can walk. The drunk guy, Joe, is suddenly able to shake his years of alcoholism. And he's it's almost like he wakes up and says, wow, I want to be a better person. And there's a few things like that happen to people. There's the doctor's mother who's got Alzheimer's, and she's this old, obviously young lady in old age makeup.
Well, everyone was covered in old age makeup, and I was worried about, like, when I saw Henry Thomas, all these actors in old age makeup, and I'm like,
that was a little disconcerting there. I felt like at first I was like, now what? And then I thought, okay, everybody's going to get young at some point, or we're going to have flashbacks or something. But there was something obviously going to happen here.
Yeah.
But aside from that, if you can let that go, it's one of these ideas where you get, the idea of getting a second chance, getting a second, getting getting these things that you don't get in real life. Like when your parent gets Alzheimer's and fades away like that, you do not get them back. But in this, the idea of, my God, she's coming back. My mother, who I thought was gone, there's a great scene where she's sort of back and she says, gosh, I feel like I was in a dream. I was in this other place and I feel like I just woke up. And then her daughter looks at her and says, Mom, like
she's suddenly lucid. Yeah.
You're back. Right. And it's a beautiful idea, but it's so bittersweet. It's so depressing, actually, the idea that, that is not ever going to happen. But you're seeing it here and you're thinking, it's almost like, another Stephen King reference. It's like Pet Sematary. Like when somebody dies, sorry, that person is gone. And the idea of getting them back, it cannot be a good thing, taking them up to the Micmac burial ground and then having them come back changed or wrong somehow.
Right.
It's not good, and this show, this series, I think points that out. It's like being healed and getting a second chance and living forever, all these things that religion apparently promises, because we've all seen faith healers and, all those things that they promise, eternal life, all these things. They're not things that we should want,
Right.
Yeah, and
they're
that's
so they're seduced.
Very
by
seductive.
yeah.
Yes,
And that's part of their brainwashing, and that's part of they have to promise people things like that. And that's what I think his skewering of that idea was pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as the mayor and his wife saw that their daughter could get out of the wheelchair,
they were in.
Sold.
Yeah,
they'd do anything.
Sold. And that they were on the side of Father Paul or Monsignor Pruitt, so it was easy to get hooked in to that. And also thinking, hey, maybe we can bring our island back to life. It's dying. Maybe we can get off island and spread this to the rest. So that's I get it. If I'm on that island leading a sad life and I see this happening to a loved one, I'm going to get on board.
Yeah.
And,
it's the Pet Sematary thing. It's like, you think, oh, I would never do that. But then if you really lost someone, like in Pet Sematary, he loses his little boy. Gosh, it's so heartbreaking. And of course, what he does is he gets the little boy and takes him up to that burial ground.
Already knowing it's not going to work the way he wants it to, but he did it anyway.
But if I can get a little piece, just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think this show kind of goes into that longing for things. And a lot of it is things that a lot of faith-based religion type things bank on, is that sort of promise of something. And it's materialistic to me. It's like, I want this, I want something, so I'm going to pray for it. And people want money, so they pray for money. And people want to be famous, so they pray for that. And they want to be healed, so they
want to win the big game.
They want to win the game. Right. Yeah, our team won because I prayed,
Right.
And they do talk a lot about religious things in this. Why does God choose this team over that team? Even if they both prayed, why does he save this person? And somebody even says it. Why does God get this little girl out of her wheelchair, but he lets another little kid die at 3 years old of some horrible disease?
I thought that was really smart. Because you feel like everyone's being blessed except for me. What happened to me? But in this instance, everybody was getting something, and they're like, "Wow, this really is a miracle." Until they find out why it's a miracle, and it's not really a miracle, but then it becomes something much worse.
Towards the end of the show, it starts getting a little unhinged as far as it's got a monster with it's like a demon with the wings, and there's a lot of blood drinking and vampire action. And then it becomes almost like a zombie kind of a thing, where there's everybody on the island is turned into this blood-hungry, out-of-control vampire, and they're going house to house, pulling people out of their houses and burning the houses down. And, they can't stand the sunlight, so I'm thinking, gosh, I saw Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee going through this thing where you use the sunlight against the vampire. And that's basically how they win at the end. But the idea, well, yeah, I mean, it's
they kind of do not intentionally, and that's what I thought was so great about it. They kind of screwed themselves. Beverly and all her greed and her lust for power basically sabotaged the entire thing because she wanted to make revelations happen.
And she thought God was on her side and God would protect her. And there was a little bit of
I loved that.
The sort of anti-vaxxer type thing in there too. It's
Absolutely.
like, well,
it's
we don't need
pandemic. Yeah.
We don't need it because we are the people of God and God is on our side and God will not let us be harmed.
He's saying he's talking about the pandemic in this for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing which is this the world of like The Walking Dead where nobody knows what zombies are in the show?
I know. Yeah.
Is this the same thing here? Like, do they know? Nobody says that could be a vampire or I could be a vampire.
Would you ever think that though? Like it just seems like you wouldn't ever think it's vampire.
For instance,
I would think this is the source of vampirism. Whatever disease this is where the stories of vampires came from.
But you have to think like you're the super religious person, and it looks like these people are pretty isolated. They probably don't even really know much. They probably don't even read horror novels or watch TV.
They grew up drinking Christ's blood.
Yeah, exactly.
So. What about the doctor, though? Here's
the doctor does,
She of course really wouldn't think vampire because she's a doctor. She's science. She wouldn't think vampire.
She does think it's a disease, though.
Yeah, she does think
it's a cellular disease. She described there's a situation where one of the characters is pregnant and then suddenly they're not because apparently this infection has absorbed and used the baby as nutrition.
Yeah.
And she is experimenting with the blood. She puts the blood in the sun and the blood burns, and she said what's left behind is normal blood, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So all these people could have been saved by transfusions.
Exactly.
So it is kind of, there's sort of a rational, I mean, not really rational because this disease doesn't really exist and it's kind of weird. Plus there's the angel monster.
Yeah, but the angel monster had to, like I said, they were being microdosed. So eventually that faulty blood would be replaced by healthy blood. Like they could have waited it out if they wouldn't go around killing everyone.
Right. The angel could be a mutated person who's lived underground eating bats all this time. So he's taken on bat DNA and
maybe it was an angel. Man. To me, I'm like, this could be an angel. Maybe this is where vampire legend came from. Is actually from angel legend. I don't know. It's
a creature that lives underground. We just don't see them very much.
Yeah.
What I liked about the show, though, is like Riley was really the main character for the first 3 or 4 episodes.
His story broke my heart.
And then that scene on the boat,
stunning.
That was intense. I thought it was like, oh my God,
I loved it.
Gone. And then you sort of switch. Aaron, played by Katie Siegel, is sort of like a main character. And then you get the doctor who kind of comes in. So I like the fact that we were switching around and seeing different characters and sort of moved.
Yeah.
And you didn't know who's really going to end up alive at the end of this.
Yeah, like who's going to be the hero? Like what's going to happen here?
Two kids. That's it. Like everybody else is gone, which is sad because I really liked Henry Thomas's character. I really liked him as a character. I thought he was interesting. And I really liked, I think the sheriff died at the end. I think he did.
Yes, he did. Definitely did.
Like he
bled
did.
to death. Yeah.
Yeah. And his poor kid, just, drank the blood and burned up. So it was sad. I understand what Burk is saying. It's like, oh, these characters that I really liked are all dead, basically.
Yeah, and it's a kind of pointless, I don't know. I think one of the things that depressed me about it was just the sound and the trappings of that style of religion that is so familiar to me, that sort of using it like a blunt instrument to attack and harm people, and harass and hurt people and belittle and degrade people.
Yep.
I think that has become one of the primary uses of faith and religion, because you can get people who have those kind of attachments to things, whether it's so-called patriotism or whether it's so-called, religion. You get people into those things, and what it is not even, it is the opposite of patriotism or religion, or it's a con.
It's a cult.
It's a cult. It's made to hurt and abuse and exploit people.
Right, and that's not the way it should be.
I think
that's the point of the show.
That's what I liked about it.
That's what I liked about it too.
Yeah, that this depressing constant justification for the worst acts and the worst and human behavior being excused by a few Bible verses, or I can go to confession and then I'll be cleansed no matter how terrible I treated someone, or the bad things I've done. I mean, I loved that because that was almost more monstrous to me than the vampire. The vampire wasn't being evil. It was just surviving. I mean, it was just perpetuating its species in a way.
It's an animal, I think.
Yeah, so I didn't even hate the vampire. I hated the people on the island who, like you said, use this religion as a way to just keep people prisoner in a way, just
I thought it
with
was,
guilt and everything else.
Right. I thought it was smart with the vampire, like towards the end where, he's sucking the blood. He's so intense that he looks at somebody coming with the gun and just like, whatever,
because he can't be hurt.
Bats it off like,
or when like
she's
taking the knife and cutting his wings. He still doesn't care.
Doesn't care because he knows it's going to heal eventually, so he didn't care.
But he
didn't realize
that idea of being so lustful, about the blood. That when people were drinking the blood, people, they would see they could see the glowing artery, and they were just so compelled. But there were some people who were good, such good people, like Riley's parents. They both meet up after they've been zombified, and killed and resurrected, and they know now that they are these vampires, but they look at each other and it's like, I haven't killed anyone. I wanted to drink their blood, but I don't want to be that.
I like that. It's like you think you can't resist it, but you can.
Right.
And so in a way it pointed out that the other people just didn't want to resist it because they thought, I don't need to.
So there's some people who are good and some people who are bad, I guess. Or
well, that's the way it is, though. And it's not like how religious you are, and that's what I thought was great.
Right.
Is that really the most honorable character was the atheist. He came in and made the ultimate sacrifice. He came in, he didn't want anything to do with it. He ends up getting attacked just randomly. He wasn't part of the plan. He knows that he's ill. He knows what's going to happen because they have that. Actually, I thought it was a great conversation. Him and the priest in that, like it is an AA, as an AA meeting, describes to him what's happening to him.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I don't want it. I don't want it. He goes, no, just go. And he goes, just go out and see. And I love the effect, the sort of hallucinogenic LSD effect of just these streaming beautiful lights. And everything looked really beautiful. Yeah. But he was like, I can't, he knew that this hunger was growing. And the fact that he decided to sacrifice himself instead of giving in to this compulsion. So here we have the atheist who did the most honorable act in the entire show, whereas all these way more religious people didn't bother. They were just like, no, my selfish needs are above all else.
And we had another character in the film that was in the series that was a searcher, someone who is looking for God, and that was the young son of the sheriff who grew up Muslim, and they showed them doing their prayers and all that, and then he wants to go to the church because he's curious, and his father basically says, you don't need that. We already have our God. We have ours. We have God already. Why are you going there to look for God? And the boy says, I'm just curious. I want to. It basically is like, I want to go. I want to learn about it.
All his friends were.
There are miracles. Miracles are happening there.
Yeah, and all the miracles
are.
Exactly.
He said there's going to be a surprise.
Right. We're going to get
I also
something.
loved, speaking of the sheriff who I loved, he was in Bly Manor also. Fantastic actor.
Yeah.
His name is Coley. It's Raul Coley. He was amazing. I love him.
Yeah, he's good.
And such good casting. You just don't expect it. I loved his discussion with the doctor about what's like to be Islamic.
Yeah.
And so he describes the whole.
Come at a different time in the script. She's telling him something really horrendous, and he says, well, yeah, wait a minute. Listen to my story. And he tells her about how hard it is to be a Muslim. I felt like, wow, it's like that cartoon where it was like, it's like, wow, yeah, I came here to tell you my problems, and how nice of you to tell me your worst problems.
Well, he was telling her that because he had to explain to her why it wasn't as easy as for him to just go out and start arresting people or blaming people or investigating, because they see him as this outsider who's not even a Catholic, and that he's had to deal with this sort of weird persecution and discrimination his whole life, and it's not as simple as like, oh, well, you're just a different religion. I mean, we had that great scene in the classroom where they did the same thing to him. Like, he's constantly like just overturned, and you're not like, I don't think people realize that they believe in God. It was like, what? Like, everybody seems surprised. And so I thought it was a very, even just for me learning about it, hearing his story was very, very interesting, just hearing about that experience, so I thought it was sort of an important character point.
I felt it
because
was
I think
a little jarring to me.
I think he was fed up.
Yeah, he was just like, these people.
I think he was fed up. He was like, what am I,
He looked very tired.
Yeah, I'm just.
But it was time for his emotional
exactly.
monologue.
I think so. Yeah. So, But I thought it was. I
it.
personally thought it was brilliant. I really gave it high marks. I understand the depressing part of it, and it was kind of sad that everybody died.
It wasn't joyous.
Well,
No, it wasn't.
Another thing I have to point out is a pet peeve of mine. I have this pet peeve.
Okay.
And this one had it, and so it did it so many times that I was like, oh no, not again. It is the mournful singing trope where people start singing a song. It's sort of like the musical equivalent of the slow clap.
But doesn't it seem like something they would be doing because they can't even not make a sentence without being religious, that they would use hymns as like this sort of community gathering, sort of rallying call? I mean, I sort of understood
that thing where it was like, oh, another, and it wasn't just the religious songs. It was the songs that they played on the soundtrack, the singing, like this mournful singing is what I call it. And I think I remember that from, I mean, it's been in a million things, but I remember that being something in the revised reboot of Battlestar Galactica, where in some of the later episodes, they would do these scenes where they were about to go out to battle. And so they would start singing this mournful, and it was always like one person would start singing and then everybody would join in and hold hands. And it's this really like amazing grace. And in this one, they did it so much. I swear to God, I expected somebody with step in with bagpipes. You know what I mean?
But this one made sense in the context of the story, even though I get it. Yeah, they did do that a lot. But at the same time, I feel like that's what these people would do. Like, they're just so that they don't know what else to do. You know, it's
maybe
like do the
once
song.
They would do it, yeah. But
no, I see them as doing it, walking to the church.
The whole song. That's just my pet peeve. I mean,
it is for me normally.
You
but
are allowed to like that.
No, it's okay. No, I don't like it normally. But for this, I felt like in the context of the story, it made sense to me because they were so overly religious. And so, of course, they would be singing hymns. I mean, it just made sense to me. I was kind of hoping at the end that when the two parents, Riley's parents, Henry Thomas, and I forget the actress's name.
Kristen Lehman.
Yeah. When they start singing, I was hoping they were going to start singing that Neil Diamond song from the beginning.
Right.
I thought that would have been kind of cooler if instead of a hymn, they'd made that a hymn, which I thought would have been kind of a fun little
Well, they did that
trick.
with Neil Diamond a few times in this. And
well, I mean, to actually sing it, not play it on the soundtrack, but actually to sing that song, I thought would have been kind of funny.
Well, I goes back to these like a 7-part series. Either you go through them quickly or they're sort of a hard. Oh, I got to watch episode 3. I didn't feel that way with this one. I just what's happening next.
It felt lean, even though it was long.
I have to say, I felt like it was a little bit long to me. I felt like this would have been a pretty interesting movie. Like a normal length movie. There was so much. There's so many of those sort of emotional monologues in this that we learned so much of the backstory of each one of the characters. We get all these mini stories that ultimately, I mean, it's if they're interesting, it's kind of fun to watch. But ultimately, there are ways to describe characters, and speaking of Stephen King, there are ways to describe a character and to introduce us to a character and reveal a character in more economical ways and like more effective, heavier ways than to literally have them sit there and tell you their life story in a really long scene. I don't know. I mean, it's sometimes I like that in longer series. I like the fact that they go on for 8 episodes or 12 episodes or whatever. So we really get to know these characters. But I felt like in this one, it was a few times where I was like, do I really need to know the whole story of this one character's sister and how she did this and that? It's like there were a lot of things that didn't relate or didn't serve the core of the story.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
I like the luxuriousness of it. Like this.
Well, I think
this
when you're doing a
time.
7-hour movie, you're gonna, and you say, this is, I get to do this as the writer. I get to flesh out the characters however way I like, and he's doing the monologues. So either they click with you or they don't.
Right.
And it depends on whether you like the characters or care about them.
And I thought some of the dialogue was really beautiful. Like I thought some of the dialogue was very beautifully said and some very touching, eloquent. I don't know, some points they were making. I really enjoyed what do you think when you die? And they had these long descriptions of what Riley as an atheist thought would happen and what she thought would happen being, Christian. And I thought that's a conversation that I think when you're an atheist or someone who's not religious, you have these conversations. And I feel like it's really hard to give that point of view of like, what happens when you die? Well, I think it ends. Like that's usually the atheist answer. Well, it's over, and I liked his like more beautiful kind of process that he described about, the brain's fireworks. And he would describe it in this sort of, scientific way of, the brain synapses firing off and the cells dying and putting out, the chemicals in your brain.
DMT.
Is just, yeah. And I thought that was a really beautiful speech. And I like how at the very end, she kind of turns that around for her point of view and combined almost the religious feeling of it with the science that he gave her. I thought that was also a beautiful speech. So in a way, I think those were two of the highlights for me are those two speeches about what they think happens when you die. And that's, I think, what made the ending less depressing to me and like in a way almost more beautiful, because you got to see the characters that divided in the ways of the ones who knew what they were doing was wrong and the people who got caught up in it, even though they were innocent of it. And their experience of the ending wasn't all horrible destruction, which you were hoping for some of those characters.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I would say here's my criticism. I think it was one episode too long, and that's all I will say. Like I felt episode 6 was really just like it could have ended there. Like episode 7 felt like a little tack on, like walking around. I don't know.
Didn't we need to see what was going to happen after that church scene? Though?
I guess it just seemed like it was a foregone conclusion. Sun's going to come up. They're going to burn up.
Well, they weren't, because we didn't know that until we knew they were burning the town down, though.
I just felt like it peaked one episode early.
I guess I like the idea of it as the virus, like we've talked about. It was also a pandemic theme of like they were going to do this in the church, hop on the boats, go to the mainland, and it was going to be a complete free for all when they get there. They're just going to spread the gospel, spread the vampire disease, spread the disease. I loved that idea. And I love that they were so arrogant that they didn't even expect the people who weren't on board to go and sabotage the boats. And so they thought, well, we'll never do that. Well, they did. So then they were trapped. I don't think they expected to be trapped.
They don't
expect
I thought that was themselves to be in danger because they're protected. They're righteous.
And I liked also the economy of the editing, like Flanagan knows when to turn off a camera sometimes, like that just makes it even more effective. Like when what you're expecting, the sun's coming up, people are catching on fire. He never stayed too long on people going up in flames. He always cut away. Either you sort of started seeing it happen and be cut. He never stayed, and you got to see this. Riley was the only one that you got to see almost the full process, but he still cut away from it until the very end.
Yeah. Bev,
so I thought that was really well done. Yeah, I wanted to see her. I could have watched that all day, see her burn up. But I thought that was a really nice.
There was like she didn't get a comeuppance really. She just was like and she's gone. It was like to see her suffer.
There's a second there where she realizes and she's trying to dig in the
hole. Yeah,
that was the great moment where she's like, she has her cowardly moment. I also like that the priest, because he ultimately it came down to a girl. And yes, he thought he was doing the right thing, but still he wanted to be with this woman, the mother who had dementia. And I guess something we found out is that the doctor was actually his daughter. They'd had a brief affair.
Scandal.
I love that. Yeah, I know. There's that little moment, I like that he saw Beverly, what she was doing, and he divided on her. He goes, nope, come into my church. You're all welcome. You do not need to be turned away. And I love that where she's at the gates. Peter, she decides you get to come through the gate to safety. I mean, I hate it. I love that he went against her and he was going to help everyone, because he knew that he created this mess. And then of course she, that gets sabotaged. And in a way he was like, yeah, okay, you're right. This is how it should happen. And then he just, I don't know. I liked his sort of turn where he created all this, but he saw the error and he went, oh my God, this is not right. I like that he found that out at the end.
Yeah.
I wanted her to be the enemy, not him, because ultimately I still liked him. Even though he did a terrible thing, I was rooting for him. It's like the actor is so good. Even when he's being horrible, I'm like, yes, please. Please don't do this.
I think we liked it in varying degrees. I think probably Burk liked it a little less than Kathy and I, but it's always interesting.
Hate it.
No, I know you didn't hate it. I think it's
it had its problems.
always brings interesting stuff. He
Yeah.
kind of shows his cards. Either you buy into it or you don't. I think some people,
Yeah.
I've read some reviews saying, well, it's not really a horror series. It doesn't have enough of that, and it's too much religion.
Horror
And
fans are very impatient a lot of times. They don't want to sit there and see not a
lot
bunch of
good
chaos.
kills. Yeah. So he's an actor's director. Every actor in this, every character got
a
their
great moment.
monologue.
Oh, yeah.
So that's you either you like that or you don't. So, but overall, I think it's a
And-
worthy show.
And what do you think about that last line in the show?
I can't feel my legs.
Did you understand the significance? Because I talked to some people about that and they didn't understand it.
What did they not understand?
They didn't understand that. To me, that meant the vampire died.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They didn't get that.
The vampire didn't make it 30 miles.
You didn't make it, but see,
He got caught in the sun.
yeah,
Right.
but see, a lot of people didn't, because I was talking to somebody and they said, well, I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen. That vampire's still out there. I'm like, he's not out there. That was the whole point of that last line. So it's like, it's one of those little distinctions and that was the other kind of tragedy of it, is that if they had just killed it, everyone would have been okay.
Yeah.
If Beverly hadn't in all her arrogance burned down the town and all those people had sheltered, and if they had somehow been able to get rid of it, done the same thing with the vampire, shredded his wings so he could get out of there, and all those people were still in there, that thing would have worn off and the spell would have been off of them. And that's what was really sad about
Well,
it.
it is the classic vampire type of thing too, where a blessing, something that seems like a blessing, is a curse. It's a blessing, it's a curse. The vampire thing, it's like, oh, you get eternal life.
Yeah.
You get to live forever. You live through the centuries. You'll observe history.
Only at night.
But you are compelled to murder people constantly. And you have to sleep in a box of dirt. There's a downside to. You always have to pay in any kind of story like this. Film noir, crime, horror fiction, religious parables. You got to pay for it.
Right.
And the other thing that I do like about it is when people resurrect the vampire, trope. It's like vampire stories are fun, usually fun, and usually it's interesting. And I did not expect this to be a vampire story.
That was the big shock. Like, what?
It's basically a flat out vampire story.
Right.
And it's set in relatively modern times. And I can remember when that was a newish kind of thing. Do you remember when this book came out? Do you know? This is my dog.
Salem's Lot.
This is
Yep.
my
Salem's
dog-eared
Lot, yeah.
copy of Salem's Lot. That was a shocker when it came out, because it was set in the present day.
Yeah.
And Stephen King had the nerve to write about this old trope, this old, like Dracula vampire, but he set it in the present day, and it's hard to imagine how.
And he humanized it. Like, he made it wasn't just like, oh, this vampire doing that and these people getting bit vampire. Like, he made these people like us. Like, they're dealing with it, and it was very interesting.
But to me, this movie, this show, this 7-part series, Midnight Mass, it really called back, like you guys mentioned before, Stephen King and Stephen King's ideas of sort of bringing this ancient mythological folk horror type of story of a vampire into the present day. But like you said, nobody ever said vampire or vampirism or anything like that. Or this is where, nobody said zombies or anything like that.
They weren't zombies, though. Looked like zombies, but they weren't.
They were vampires.
Yeah.
So
Baby vampires.
Yeah. But it was, to me, it kind of felt a lot like Salem's Lot to me.
I felt the vampire story was so background. Like, I felt like the religious story and the religious brainwashing and the dovetailing of vampire almost underneath made it less of a vampire story to me. It brought, like, the vampire was almost the excuse for all the shit they were doing, and they tried to pretend like it wasn't up to them, but it was ultimately. That's why I kind of liked the vampire was a pretty small part of most of the episodes till like the very end. You barely saw it. Like, you could see some wings maybe once in a while, or you see like a quick attack, but it wasn't like they followed this vampire around at all. It was really about the priest. And
the idea of it was
flock.
the fact that he was infecting this island with vampirism,
Right.
and it manifested itself in these wonderful blessings, the beautiful
It's a
things
miracle.
about vampirism. You get all your ailments are healed, and you're brought back to your young self, and
prime
you get
self.
restored. You're restored, and all those things are very biblical sounding, and
Yeah.
all these ideas, these sadly empty promises that false prophets will make to their marks. The snake oil salesman, it's like, drink this and you'll be healed and you'll feel younger, and they get the old grandpa in old age makeup to go up to the stage, and he drinks the oil, and he throws his cane away and he starts doing a dance up on the stage, and it's like, look at him, ladies and gentlemen, he can dance.
Yeah, but subversive thing about this is he didn't even give them a choice. He was dosing them without them knowing, and that was like the really subversive part of it, is that he's against their will in a way.
It was a real thing. It was a real potion that will restore you.
Well, that's the conceit of religion, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And that's what I thought was so great.
Yeah.
But this potion, it's that whole idea. It's like it's like with heroin, it's like any kind of a thing, another biblical term, it's like being a thief in the temple. You're thieves in the temple if you're not paying for it. You know what I mean? You have to pay for it. Revelation, illumination, whatever. You can't just go in and take a drug and say, oh, I'm illuminated, now I'm a holy man.
Yeah.
You have to, if you really want to be enlightened and, spiritually raised up to another level, you can't just drink a soda pop and, suddenly, like a snake oil, and suddenly your grandpa dancing on the stage. And you don't get that second chance without paying for it. And I think that's another biblical kind of thing, the idea of thieves in the temple, where you don't get it. You don't get it for free. You can't just drink it out of a bottle,
Well, I think they've paid the price. There'll be no more crock potlucks.
I can't say that there's not more of those angels out there. I mean, we don't know that. He may not have been the only angel that's lurking around.
I don't want to see a second part to this, because it would just be, it's like, okay, somebody else is fighting against the vampire.
I think this is the one and done.
Oh, no, this is it.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying.
To be one and done, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, just because you get rid of one evil doesn't mean there's not evil in the world.
Sure.
And so that I think was kind of a cool little message also. And, and also just some great actors, some really cool, deep horror dive, like of making this a little more emotional, making this a little more like, an analogy for how religion works. And, I just thought that was really smart.
And we do have to put a warning before we close out on this. We have to put a warning out on episode 2. There is a very sad dog death.
I fast forwarded that.
And we love animals around here. We have our mascot Darwin, who we just haven't seen lately because he doesn't come in here very often. But he's come in.
We heard my dogs.
Yeah. But, we always try to point out if there's any kind of harrowing animal death in this.
And some cats.
And a bunch of cats. But,
the cat thing. I thought the cat scene was really strange.
They look like stuffed toys to me.
I'm
not
so
as
glad they look
harrowing.
like stuffed toys.
Yeah.
I'm glad that
I felt like somebody was going to pick one up and say, oh, that toy factory on the other side of the island? They must have got hit by the storm because all their toy cats.
It's the Crockett Cat Toy Factory.
Yeah. I thought, just one quick note before we sign out, is that a little bit of behind the scenes information I read about is that when they originally started this film, it was before the pandemic.
Oh,
and
really?
That town was completely built. It did not exist. It was like they built the entire town.
Oh.
So they built this town, and then the pandemic happened and they had to leave. So it talks about how Mike Flanagan and his wife are in the plane flying over, and they look back and they see the little town down there built on the coast like that. It was in Canada. So he said months later, like many months later, they went back. And I'm wondering if some of that weathering of the sets really helped, because it made it look a lot more lived in. Yeah, so it's kind of funny to think it's not even a real town.
Weathering and aging is very difficult for production design. That's one thing that if you get it wrong, it looks stupid.
Yeah.
And if you get it right, it looks beautiful. But, if you can let it happen realistically, like if you can shoot on a real location, and the idea of being able to build your production, you build your production design, you build your sets, and then to leave them there so that they get naturally
aging.
That's great. I bet a
good.
production designer was like, I wish I could do this every time.
I know. Probably also worried, like, are they still going to be there when we get back? So they're not really built to last.
Because they're not.
But I thought
to
that was pretty
too
interesting.
much.
It looked good. It didn't look.
It looked really good.
It didn't look like some backlot thing to me.
Yeah, the production design was really nice.
Yeah.
I do have to have to pick a little bit of bone here with the old age makeup though, but
That's really hard. And, I think part of it's because, we recognize a lot of the actors. So it was kind of a giveaway that something was going to happen. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to let it slide because how else are they going to do it? I mean,
well, it can be done. I mean, Dick Smith did it with The Exorcist, with Father Merrin in The Exorcist. You know that Max von Sydow, Father Merrin, this old, decrepit, near-death old man, he was in his early 40s when he shot that. And Dick Smith did the makeup. But it's
Dick
not
Smith
just,
is also incredible. He's like the top of the food chain.
But it wasn't just Dick Smith. It was also Max von Sydow's performance. He embodied that makeup in a way that, even without the makeup, you would have felt like he was an old man. Just the way he moved and talked, that's a big part of old age. And I think some people, when they're playing old age, they tend to do this kind of voice that's like an old person. But then, have you ever heard an old person talk like that? It's like, listen to real old people, how they talk, and the way they move. And I think Max von Sydow really listened to, really observed, and really paid attention. I think that is a huge part of old age makeup, is the actor.
Yeah, I had no problem with it.
Yeah, that was all right. I was okay with it.
But no,
there was a lot of old age makeup. A lot.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody had it, and that was sort of. But I liked the sort of gradual. Well, that's what's funny is everyone's gradually getting younger, but no one's really mentioning it. Like how good they look right now. It's like they didn't really talk about like they'd sometimes look in the mirror like she all of a sudden realized she didn't need her glasses anymore.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of a fun little hint, but no one really.
And it was because she was looking at blood too. Was kind of weird. It was a little distracting as she like.
That was a little like foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing,
maybe.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, overall, very enjoyable series. Smarter than most. I think more successful than Bly Manor for sure. I probably still a little leaning toward Haunting of Hill House because I just liked that concentrated one actor per episode being a highlight. But I still thought this was a really, really fun, and it had some genuinely scary, profound things in it for me. So I'd say, yay, Mike Flanagan, make more.
Yeah, I'm with you there too.
Yeah, he's great.
And don't forget to, for us, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us what you think of Midnight Mass, what you thought of it if you saw it, and comment below.
Thank you. Be sure to do that. All right. See you guys next time.
Enjoyed the conversation. Take care, everybody.
Everybody, take care. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.